Welcome to Demystifying Mental Health, where we break down stigmas, learn the brain science, and discover actionable steps for a healthier, more empathetic you. I'm your host, Dr. Alauna, trauma psychiatrist, and I am focused on educating the world on how trauma connects us all and the many, many ways in which empathy heals. Guess what, y'all? I'm looking around and I'm thinking, it's time to evolve. Today's episode is called Demystifying Addiction, a conversation on science, trauma, and healing. And today I have the pleasure of talking to my fellow Mocha Doc, Dr. Nzinga Harrison, a pioneering physician, educator, and advocate for innovation, who has just created an amazing approach to recovery and wellness. She is the co-founder and chief medical officer of Alauna Health, the host of Unaddiction, a podcast about addiction, and the author. My girl is the author. I love this book, y'all, of Unaddiction, a dive into the complex relationship between trauma and addiction. And Dr. Nzinga's groundbreaking book talks about addiction and recognizes it as a chronic biological illness, not a choice. So we're going to explore the science behind addiction. Today, we're going to debunk some common myths about addiction, and we're going to discuss trauma-informed approaches to recovery and learn how to break free from the cycles of addiction that hold us hostage for generation after generation so we can find hope for healing. Dr. Nzinga, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Alauna. I'm so happy to see you.
And the crowd goes wild. All right, y'all. This is one of my dear friends, and this is such an important conversation. So thank you for joining me here today. We have to talk about addiction.
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but I have found that getting folks, now look, we on blackdoctor.org, so we got to keep it real. For my peoples, can I talk to you? We have a hard time talking about addiction.
Mhm.
And it's a I from a cultural standpoint, I think that we have used external substances to cope with
Mhm.
the years after years of the shenanigans. They have some statistics that say nearly 90% of Black individuals with a diagnosed substance use disorder did not receive addiction
Mhm.
treatment,
Mhm.
which highlights the significant ethnic slash racial disparities that go on with our access to care. And that to me, I could just speaking from my own experience, just seeing not just my family, but observing other families as a psychiatrist, just listening to people talk about it,
Mhm.
folks are like, get your words off of me.
Right.
Shoo.
That's right. That's right. I mean, that's why you held up the book. Thank you. The subtitle of the book, you see it there? 6 mind-changing conversations that could
Mm,
save a life. Because exactly like you said, like, one, we're not talking about addiction. And two, people don't understand that addiction starts way before you end up homeless, or way before your wife kicks you out, or way before you lose your job, right? Like, our concept of addiction is the most severest. Like, if it was cancer, stage
mhm.
4 metastatic,
Yeah,
chemo
yeah,
resistant, right? Like, that's our concept of addiction.
right. Your
Like,
liver got to be falling out,
your
and man,
liver
okay,
is
okay,
out. You got
there,
out of bed, your liver stayed in the bed, right? Like, that thing
right.
fell out. And like, we have to be able to have this conversation earlier, because you're right. The shenanigans, day in, day out, month after month, year after year, generation after generation, increases our risk that, one, we pick up a substance to cope, and two, that we develop an addiction to that substance. And so, how do we talk about it? Prevention. How do we talk about it with our kids, which there are scripts in the book, right? How do we talk about it with our girlfriend that's passed out and throwing up in the bathroom on vacation, you know? So
Yeah.
if we can
See,
talk about it, we can start to get ahead of it.
thank you for saying that because that gives me hope. Because there's some people that I even need to have some conversations with,
Yeah,
like, hey, uh, sis, I love you, and holding your head above this water, helping you, deal
right.
with this stuff is not a good look. So
Yeah.
let's
And sometimes "Sis, I love you" is looking in the mirror, right? Like, "Sis, I love you, and I recognize that this is a struggle that I could use some support for."
that part. Hold
Yeah.
on. Hey, so and we're going to get into that more because that's such an important thing for us to acknowledge is that we're not just having this conversation about the other people in your life. One of the hardest things to do in addiction is to see yourself.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Dr. Nzinga, your book shifts the narrative from addiction as a moral, religious, spiritual failing to a chronic biological, medical illness, basically. Really stabilizing it. And this is a genetic experience, this is a physical body experience. As a human being, you are a big science, big bubbling cauldron of science that's going on in all times, and that we can think about addictions differently. So give me a little bit about what inspired you to take this different approach to addiction, from a kind of, and nothing against 12 steps, but from, it's what people think of when they think of addiction recovery, that a lot of it is based in a becoming one with your higher power and all those the other religious elements of it. What inspired you to take this more compassionate science-based approach?
Yeah, and for many that is, right? And so what I'll say is there are an infinite number of paths to addiction, and so there are an infinite number of paths to recovery, and every person's, what I say in the book, magic formula is your own individual magic formula. To answer your question, the medical evidence, right? So when we look at substance use disorders, 40 to 60% of your risk of developing a substance use disorder, which is the diagnosis we use kind of for the term addiction, is coded in your DNA the day you're born. That is very similar and actually a bit higher than high blood pressure, a bit higher than asthma, a bit higher than type 2 diabetes. So we accept those as chronic medical conditions, same biological genetic risk profile. When we look at the relapse rates, so we call it chronic because it's not like pneumonia where you have it, you take an antibiotic, it's gone. You have the
Mhm,
flu, you lay around in misery for a few days and then it's gone. Those are acute illnesses. Chronic
mhm,
illnesses stay around and they can relapse, which means you're having symptoms, or they can be in remission, which means you're not having symptoms. When you look at the relapse rates for substance use disorder, they are very similar to the relapse rates of diabetes, high blood pressure, asthma, these other conditions that we accept as general medical conditions. And so, if we can understand substance use disorders and other addictions as chronic medical conditions, one, we can have the conversation because you're not just a bad, inadequate person making bad
mhm,
decisions, which is
mhm.
what we currently think, right?
Yes,
So,
that's
like, one, we
absolutely.
can have the conversation and say, Dr. Alana, I'm actually concerned about you because these are the symptoms I see of this illness, as opposed to I'm concerned about you because you're acting like a douchebag right now, which addiction will make people ask.
Oh,
I mean, like the douchebaggy behavior is definitely one of the symptoms, not the person, right? And then it
yes.
also allows us to figure out like what is that formula for you? What's your biological risk? What's your psychological risk? Trauma being
Mhm.
huge. What's your environmental risk? And how do we intervene to prevent your symptoms from coming back?
Yeah, that's such a, I mean, the answer is so simple, right? Why did I do it? Because the evidence says
The
this is
medical
the
evidence.
reality. Yeah,
Mhm.
the evidence. There's a lot of very smart people who have studied these things
Mhm.
over a very long period of time. And we now have new evidence that says that we have brain and biology,
That's
and
right.
those are things that we need to be aware of and control. So I know you probably know a bit about my work, but when I hear you
Yeah.
describe it, I think about at least two of the brain systems that
Mhm.
are really important in understanding your mental health. So I'll share those with the audience now. For one, we all have six primitive brain systems that are predictably programmed by traumatic experiences. Every human being on earth, if you're functional and you're working, if you can hear and see and follow what we're talking about, your brain has a brain reward system
Mhm.
that's driven by a chemical called dopamine. Dopamine is powerful.
Yes.
Dopamine, I gotta say, is one of our favorite things. You know,
Yeah.
you get some dopamine and you get some dopamine.
Yes.
And the problem with dopamine is that it can create so much intense sensation and pleasure and euphoria within our body, but it fades quickly. Our
Mhm.
body is constantly pumping it out, eating it up, and disposing of it and needing more. And that is provided by lots of things in our life. Human beings wake up every day and start chasing dopamine.
Mhm.
Right? We wake up and what do? We
Eat.
grab we grab food, that's salt and sugar and oils and
Uh-huh.
good tasty things that the Europeans went all over the world conquering territory trying to get flavors they still don't use, okay? So we we like dopamine in our food, and then we grab our coffee
Mhm.
and our tea and our candies and our phones.
Don't
We
forget
put
the
on our
phone now.
don't forget the phones, right? Our video games, our social media likes and comments and interactions and arguments. Ooh, put a pin in that argument one because we're gonna come back to that one.
Uh-huh.
Because there's so many times where, I came up to, it's so crazy to say, like, I'm 25 years in medicine. Like, what? What are we talking about here?
I know, right?
This can't be.
That's black
But
don't crack. Oh, go ahead.
I mean, it does, but if you put a little lotion on it, it'll fix it. Okay.
Moisturize.
Okay. But here's the challenge becomes that we came up thinking that substances were the only, thing. The
Mhm.
alcohol, you see the obvious problems with the cocaine and crack epidemic. Now we're dealing with the opioid and the fentanyl
Mhm.
crisis. And we're like, why would anybody do drugs when you see all these things that happen? But we don't actually see ourselves doing these drugs, these behavior drugs, the way we
Work.
eat, the way we work, right? That we workaholics,
Mhm.
shopping
Mhm.
aholics,
Mhm.
gamble aholics.
Mhm. Sex.
There's so many things that create dopamine and making money aholics,
Mhm.
greedaholics,
Mhm.
billionaires. Get your lives together. Uh, but it becomes very difficult to get people to recognize it because it's so pervasive. But the brain reward system and dopamine is the same foundation, whether the intake is marijuana or if it's Xanax, benzos, all of these things still
Yes.
come back to that one chemical dopamine, and our bodies crave it. So we all have addictive behaviors that we
Mhm.
need to learn to wrangle. And the other brain system that this makes me think of is mirror neurons.
Mhm.
We have these brain systems that soak up information from the environment and help us mirror it out, reflect it out to our environment, and uh, it helps us understand the world around us. The sounds, okay, this sound means that. This behavior from my family member, it means that. And we program ourselves in a way to reflect the environment so we can stay safe in it, even when the environment is repeatedly unsafe.
Mhm.
So when it comes to mirror neurons, when we grow up, a lot of times we're seeing our parents smoke that smoke, or family members of people we think are cool, drink that drink. Everybody's walking around making a nightcap or having their glass of wine, or we grow up with so many addictive behaviors around us and external negative coping skills that we see uh, poor coping skills long before anybody introduces us to healthy coping skills like mindfulness and meditation. You know, you might get some prayer through church or other type of mediums, but really those being outside and walking in environment and exercise and all these other things are like that's not what we saw growing up, because our
Mhm.
people were dealing with a lot of trauma, honestly.
Mhm.
So when I hear you explain this conversation, why this book really excited me was because it really helped us get into this is programming.
Yes.
And the
This,
good thing about programming is that what's programmed can be updated. Go ahead,
uh-huh.
you were about to say something.
I love that what's programmed can be updated. So I love that education on the dopamine pathway. And so we call it the reward system, we call it the motivation system. If you look all the way back evolutionary speaking, it's exactly what you said. That system is designed to keep us safe and keep us alive by telling us what matters, right? And so when you look at how your brain interprets what matters, it's the size
Mm,
of the dopamine signal, it's how long dopamine stays in the synapse, the space between your nerve cells, and food, water, sex, nurturing. Those are the natural things that give us dopamine. When you look at the size of the dopamine signal that food, water, sex,
mm,
nurturing, you can call nurturing friends and family and community, right? The size of that dopamine signal is like a light bulb. And then you look at alcohol, cocaine, methamphetamine, marijuana, opioids, gambling, shopping. The size of that dopamine signal is like the brightness of the sun. And so, just biologically, when your brain is interpreting what is most important to my survival, it's no longer food, water, friends, family, and community. It becomes this synthetic source of dopamine whose signal is the brightness of the sun. But what is
mhm.
programmed can be updated, right? Like auto install, update. But that update has to come on understanding and intention.
Mm. Now see, now you said something really important here. The word understanding. It
Mhm.
requires education.
Yes.
It requires self-study.
Mm.
It requires some reflective honesty.
Yes.
And it requires you looking at how your traumatic experiences have played out in your life. Now, Dr. Nzinga, I don't think I've ever had anybody who was like, I volunteered to talk about and think about and dig into my childhood experiences, we'll use the clinical term adverse childhood
Mhm.
experiences. Most people just want to just keep on forge through day by day,
Mhm.
be what they say, be strong, be resistant, be resilient, all power forward. You know, we've gone through a whole pandemic and the world just zooms right along as if we're not watching uh, the repercussions of the
Yeah.
years of trauma spinning out in our society. So let's talk a little bit about what are childhood factors, because you break it into two categories about childhood factors and adult factors. So let's
Mhm.
talk a little bit about childhood factors. What are some of those things that influence addiction early in your life?
Yeah, so you call them out ACEs, adverse, which means negative childhood experiences. And one of our pull yourself up by the bootstrap cultural things in US is like, you're grown now. It don't matter what happened in high school. It matters, right? And so this data very clearly shows us of these 10 questions that they studied, a score of 4 or more. So you answer each question yes or no, and a score of 4 or more is directly associated with your health later in life, your physical health, your mental health, and your social health. So premature death, cancer, unexpected pregnancy, depression, suicide, addiction, smoking, obesity, all of these can be predicted, stroke, heart attack, all of these can be predicted by your ACEs score. And the types of questions are, um, did you have your parents get divorced? Did you experience abuse, verbal or physical? Did you have a parent in the home with mental illness? Did you have a parent in a home with substance use disorder? Did you have a parent go to jail? Right? There are 10 of these questions, and a score of 4 or more represents a significant risk for you. Importantly, all of those questions kind of relate to what's happening inside your house as a child as you're growing up. And I love the Philadelphia ACEs project. I talk about it in the book because the Philadelphia ACEs project is like, just what's happening in the house is not the whole story. So when you walk outside the house, do you experience discrimination and racism? Do you experience bullying? Do you live in a community that is safe, or are you fearful in the community that you live in and have to be on alert? Because I know Dr. Alauna going to talk to us about the amygdala next, right? And the role that it's playing in recreating our traumas, and feeding that risk for substance use disorder. So
Mhm.
I encourage people, take that ACEs, because one, your childhood matters.
Mhm.
Two, if you don't address the traumas from earlier in your life, they will continue to affect you in your life today in ways that you can't control. So by opening your eyes to it, that gives you the power to update your programming.
Now listen, since you done said something right here, and I needed to clean my glasses because I need us to see clearly now. Okay, I understand it now, as my son would
Wait, hold
say.
on. Excuse-
Yeah, what you said is you have to take a look at your past,
Yes.
and you have to check some boxes in your own mind about the fact that walking outside your, let's start with inside the house, right?
Mhm,
The parents, the mom and the dad that maybe not getting along. Maybe they're together, but they don't get along. So
mhm,
what are you hearing in the house, and how do people
mhm,
talk to each other?
mhm,
Are they how are the words flying around in your home space? Yes, it mattered that you got teased about your lips, about your hair, about your nose, about your skin color.
yes.
Yes, it matters that you got teased about, it's funny because there's no category where you can't be teased. If you
Mhm,
look good, somebody's gonna tease you because they don't like how you look and carry yourself. If you got a funny feature, they're gonna find a way to talk about that and exploit that and make you
mhm,
feel bad about it. So let's keep it real that we grow up in environments. I mean, I'm from St. Louis.
mm,
We Joan, okay? That's what we called it growing up, but there's been many names, playing the dozens,
yeah,
however you want to call it. But you get called everything but a child of God. And you actually might get called a child of
yeah.
God too, along with some other stuff, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm,
those experiences, even though we're like, well, it made me stronger because I know how to talk to people and I know I don't let people, but the programming that it does to your brain, let's talk about your amygdala,
mhm,
which is the part of your brain that creates all of your emotions, but you may be familiar with it as being responsible for your fear responses.
mhm,
And your amygdala is always running,
mhm,
always. It doesn't even turn off when you're asleep. That's why you can have nightmares and dreams that you wake up and you can still have some residual emotion from them. And what that amygdala is doing is calculating the environment that you're
mhm,
moving through and then letting your body know how to feel in any given moment. And it's very good at throwing the worst case scenarios in your face. So if somebody at school is bullying you when you're at home and getting up in the morning and your stomach is upset because you don't want to go to school, you're upset,
mhm,
and yes, your tummy hurts, but that's also your brain going, oh, I got to see that person again today. What are they going to do? Are they going to hit me? Am I going to have to run? Do I need to hide? Am I living in a gang infested area where even if I'm not part of the gang, And let's talk about especially gang members. They're still human. So it's very real, the grief that
Yeah.
they're dealing with about their friend. Like, okay, you hurt my friend, you killed my friend, I'm gonna kill your friend. Those are emotional
Mm.
trauma responses. They're amygdala driven, and they are part of what we talk about when we're talking about ACEs. If you live in an impoverished area, sometimes it doesn't even have to be an impoverished area. Now they good, everybody got guns these days.
Yeah.
Okay. So just in looking at how the trauma programs your brain, your genetics set up some responses to these things, and then your environment may be exposing you to people
That's
who
right.
do these behaviors. And even if you don't like the behaviors that they do, they're still showing you coping mechanisms that when
Mm.
you get to the space where you have access, or maybe you have early access, then it makes it hard for you not to do those things in the
Hmm.
future.
That's right. In a nutshell.
In a nutshell. So let's go to the adult factors, because we talk about how these ACEs and experiences program us, but then we also have our social environment, our
Mm.
cultural pressures, and just personal things that come up in our life where it's like, man, what do I do when life is hitting me?
Right.
Well, society says get a drink, right? Go get a
It's
drink.
1 o'clock somewhere.
We've heard that probably all our lives. It's happy hour somewhere,
It's
right?
happy hour somewhere.
So um how do these adult experiences, how do you think they shape and program our brain's stress response, and what can we do about that?
Yeah, so the incredible thing about the brain, we used to have this idea that like you develop your brain. We thought up to 18 and then it's done. And they were like, "Oh no, the brain is still developing until 26 and then it's done." No, your brain is continuously pruning. The term is neuroplasticity. It is
Mhm.
evolving, it is adapting. Like Dr. Alauna said, it is taking in all of that stimulus from the environment, from your internal signals, deciding what it means, and then your prefrontal cortex is deciding what to do about it. When we look at as adults, people tend to think of the big losses or the big stressors as being very dangerous when it comes to substance use. So you lost your job, or someone died, or someone had a stroke, or a boyfriend broke up with you, or you get divorced. Those are kind of like the big things that we think about, and those are definitely important. But what is more catastrophic to our programming is the insidious daily stressors. And so, if we're talking about discrimination and racism, the cumulative microaggressions are more catastrophic than the big explicit macroaggression. The just less money than I really need to be comfortable is more stressful than losing the job. The not having enough time to get things done, cumulative stress, is more catastrophic than the big grief incident. And so we tend to think of those big incidents like the rest of the time you should be okay, when every day these cumulative stressors are eroding our resilience and programming our amygdala
Mhm.
look for danger and give us those danger emotions. And then our prefrontal cortex doesn't know what to do with that information other than the coping skills that we've seen throughout our lives, in our families, in our communities, in the media. And so it really culturally is like, just do a drink, just take an edible, just play a video game, right? As
Mhm.
opposed to, let's look at these cumulative eroding stressors that are part of our everyday lives and figure out how to manage them.
How to manage it. Oh, that's so important. I'm glad you said that, because if you think about us as a biological entity, it makes sense that the day to day, like, oh, I need that raise, and they gave that promotion to somebody else, even though I'm
Mhm.
already doing the work.
That's right.
That's racism, that's sexism, that's the invisible psychological slaps that you are legit feeling. That's
Mhm,
real. It's
mhm.
not all in your head. It's in your brain and then it's in your body, because your
Yes.
body then communicates sensations to the rest of us. And then we have this clunky language called stress. But
Mhm,
what it really is that it's your biological response to that
mhm.
hurt, that your body goes, oh, give me something. Ooh,
Yes.
dopamine. Where's my dopamine? Where,
That's right.
where can I get it? And
That's right.
unfortunately, so many people have learned to get it through the bottle, or get it through the drug, or get it through the experience, that while it may feel good in the moment,
Mhm.
and it may distract at least from the overall challenge, in the long run, it's building up consequences in your body, in your lungs, in your liver,
Right.
in your, alcohol has had an amazing run. Okay. Let's just keep it real. I was thinking about this the other day, like, man, alcohol had the best marketing campaign of any substance that I can think of, because we just like humans. We like being twisted.
Yeah. I mean, the latest is
Don't
like, let's put some alcohol in our water. I was like, this is the next level, like hard seltzer water. This is the next level because they convince you it's healthy because it's water, but they put
right. It
alcohol in it.
Yeah, I hate to break it to y'all. If you don't want bad news about something, you might want to stop here, but come on, stay. All right. There is no discernible positive health value to any alcohol
That's
products,
right.
beer, wine, liquor,
Evidence spoken.
powdered alcohol. Listen, I still drink. So I'm telling you, I've tried to drink less, but I need you to understand that the studies that were like, oh, there's heart benefit to alcohol. No, there has been a concerted effort to market alcohol as something that is good for us, but the data shows that it raises our risk of all kind of cancers. It
Yes.
raises the risk of esophageal and a GI and stomach
Yes.
disease. It raises we know it burns out livers. It
Yes.
causes increase. It basically makes every organ in your body struggle. It's a poison.
Well, you know
It's a
why, Dr. Alana? When you want to sterilize your countertops and kill all of the organisms and cells, what do you wipe it with?
alcohol.
So that's what's happening.
Mm, mm.
That's what's
Dang,
happening.
dang.
Alcohol is poison. I wanted to say a minute ago when you said, I thought it was so important. You were validating the experiences that people are having discrimination, racism, sexism, genderism, all the isms. Your experience is real. And I'm sorry, I can't attribute this quote. The person that I first heard this from won't come to me. But they said, addiction is as natural a response to trauma as bleeding is to being cut.
Facts. It is I use the analogy all the time of an invisible wound.
Yes.
And what they're doing with trauma is sort of death by a thousand cuts, is just hitting us so many different ways that we self-destruct. And so that we have control over, but it comes through information. So before I forget to say this, if you're enjoying this program and if you know somebody else that needs to have this conversation about addiction, this is Demystifying Mental Health with Dr. Alauna, trauma psychiatrist on blackdoctor.org. Please like, follow, and share this conversation, because there are some folks in your life, including you, that need
Mhm.
to have this conversation. I want to highlight the 6 critical conversations that
Mhm.
you put in your book, that are so important to shifting our understanding. And I'm going to go through the 6 and just summarize them, and then we'll walk back through them. And I'd like to get just a little bit more on each one. But those 6 in critical conversations are: number 1, unlearning misconceptions. This means basically breaking your myths about addiction. Okay, this is demystifying mental health. And so we have to understand that there's some information that's been missed. How about that? What you think you know about it is not the full answer. Number two, undoing stigmas, breaking through this inability to talk about mental health concepts and addictions. We've been able to talk about being gay, transgender, and queer. We've been able to talk about sexual assault and abuse and other things. We've been able to talk about all manner of problems in society, but we are still having extreme difficulty really talking about mental health because of the stigma. But guess what? We all have a brain, so get over it. Number three, uncovering solutions. There are answers to these problems. These challenges are actually treatable, and there's good evidence-based programs in science that are helping people make progress when they engage. Number four, biological factors, understanding the biological factors. Number five, recognizing psychological influences. And number six, considering social cultural impacts. So let's go back to the top, sis.
Okay.
Unlearning misconceptions. What do you think are some of the most common adult misconceptions and myths about addiction?
We touched on the top two, and I'll add one more. The first misconception is that it's everybody else. It is all of us. So 46% of Americans have someone close to them who is struggling with addiction to a substance. When you add what you so expertly did at the top of the hour, work, sex, gambling, shopping, money, games, exercise for some people, right? All of the things that hinder
Some people are addicted to people,
the people,
sport,
relationships, love, sports, right?
fanatics,
Fanatics. That's literally what fan is short for.
literally what fans are.
So when you add all of those, it is all of us. To quote Dr. Alauna, all of us have a brain, right? So that's number one. It's not them, it's us. Number two, it's a choice. Drug use is a choice that the overwhelming majority of all of us make. Addiction is an illness. Addiction is when it stops being a choice. And so we have to draw that distinction, because when we think of addiction as a choice, then we're mad at people, like, just make better choices. And that makes us not want to help them. That removes our empathy and compassion for them. When we understand addiction as an illness that is torturing the people we love and thereby torturing us as well, that naturally generates our empathy and wanting to figure out what we can do to help. And then the third one is that there's no help. 75% of people who have experienced addiction today consider themselves on a recovery path in recovery. That's 3 out of 4. And so we spend all of our time talking about the hopelessness of addiction, which is another reason why we're so afraid to say, maybe I have it, because if I have it, there's nothing that can be done. 3 out of 4 people are living a different life because they went through the process of understanding and learning how to train that prefrontal cortex to make different decisions from the information that amygdala is sending forward.
I love that. Hallelujah to that. What I'm hearing you say is that treatment actually works if we
That's
can
right.
get people to engage in that process. Let's go to undoing stigma, because stigma is a huge part of this process that we have to even have the conversation. You have to get people in the door. Folks don't even go to the door. You can dragging you in, kicking and screaming, friend, trying to have this conversation about these behaviors. So how do we, I know for me growing up, I consider myself more spiritual now than religious, but I grew up with the Christian background. And, most of the opportunities that people have for addiction treatment often come through churches and come through a Christian based type of system that works for some, but does not work for many others, because there's Christians are still a minority of a global population. and we are a diverse culture. So when I started looking at addiction and stigmas, it was still across the board, no matter the culture, no matter the background. It was like, no, leave me alone in my stuff. This is what we do. And it's very hard to get people to actually even want to engage in the conversation. So what do you do when it comes to addressing stigma?
Yeah, and it's funny, I'll probably start every single one of these conversations out with, "It's not them, it's us." So when you can relate, the foundational belief and the science supports this, is that connection is the basis of health. Connection and compassion together are the
Mhm.
basis of all of the types
All
of
health.
health that we want,
Nature's
right?
dopamine.
It is dopamine. It is a natural determinant that generates dopamine. And so stigma is a way of making people disconnected, othering people. Discrimination is a way of kicking people off the island, kicking people out of the pack, right? Like we're pack animals. That's why we have families. That's why we have communities. That's why we partner up, whether
Yeah,
that's
we always find a tribe.
yeah, we always find
Whether
a
it's
tribe.
red, blue, gang banging, whatever, the police, like with like all
One
communities.
way or the other, period. We are pack
Yes.
animals. And so stigma is a way of kicking people out of the pack. And so when I say, if you can look at yourself and imagine a time when you experience something similar that this person is experiencing, even if it's not the same thing,
Mhm.
right? Then that generates our natural need to connect, to pack up. And
Yeah.
so if we can pack up, I just saw this great commercial. I ain't gonna say the brand because they ain't pay me for it. But it
Yeah.
said, they said, smiling first can make a big difference.
Yeah. You don't have to wait till you feel good to start exercising that smile.
Yeah. And when you smile at somebody else, that
Yeah.
starts that
With the
connection.
energy.
And so this
Mhm.
is the premise of the conversation is just take the risk to connect. That will
Mm.
bring down stigma. It's all of us.
So good. Number 3, uncovering solutions. Tell me just a little bit about some of the evidence-based treatments and options and interventions that you know are helpful for these conditions.
Yeah, so we're going to preview the last 3 conversations: biological, psychological, environmental. The first part of the book is understanding your biological risk, your genetic risk, any physical health conditions you may have, your psychological risk, your childhood experiences, your social risk, your culture, your environment. So when we look at evidence-based practices biologically, we have medications now that make a
Mhm.
huge difference. We have medications for alcohol, FDA approved, medications for opioid, FDA approved, medications for marijuana and stimulants that are not FDA approved, but that have good data. And so
Mhm.
just like sometimes you want to control your diabetes without insulin or a pill, but sometimes life is such that you need insulin or a pill, the same is true for substance use disorders. Consider if it might be a tool for your toolbox. Psychologically, connection, trauma-focused therapies,
Mhm.
cognitive-based strategies. These are really the 3 big evidence-based psychotherapeutic interventions because they're targeting those major systems in your brain that Dr. Alauna teaches us about. And then
Mhm.
finally, social interventions is all about connection. So even if you don't go to treatment, you need to find your tribe where you have an unconditional sense of acceptance and belonging. Period. I had a person say to me recently that I was taking care of, he said, I have never felt so accepted than when I was with people who use drugs. And
'Cause they
so
get it.
we have to know that we have to be able to replace that, right? Like people think I'm just going to stop using drugs and everything's going to be gravy. Nah,
Yeah.
you have to
And that
find.
that actually makes a really important point that I just want to put a bow on, because judgment is psychologically harmful.
That's right.
People feel the slap
Yep.
of judgmental words upside their psychological head. And so, how you talk to them about their choices and their substance use really matters in getting your message into them.
That's
So,
right.
for the sake of time, we're going to go to the next one,
Mhm,
understanding biological factors. I know we talked a little bit about this,
mhm,
and how the genetics and brain
mhm.
neurobiology is so important in understanding addiction. You cannot heal from and manage a condition that you won't name, that you won't accept, that you won't acknowledge is coming from your own body. It ain't the
Mhm.
devil that's got you up in the middle of the night getting that ice cream when you know you want to lose weight, or the devil that's got you smoking or gambling away your rent. Is dopamine.
That's right.
Now, do your family experience it as demonic or evil? Those are subjective terms
Mhm.
that display and attempt to describe how horrific and painful the outcome is going to be for you and them if you continue in to allow that primitive choice to be to make your next experience more primitive and stressful and
Mhm.
traumatic. But it is not a standalone condition that happens outside of you. Addiction is about what's actually going on with your biology. So
Yes.
we're going to go to number 5, recognizing psychological influences. Can you talk just a little bit about how depression and anxiety and PTSD, those conditions, influence addiction?
Absolutely. So depression, anxiety, PTSD sit in our limbic system, right? Where our dopamine pathway is, where our amygdala is, and ultimately that prefrontal cortex. And what they do is really weaken your prefrontal cortex, which has the ability to like make sense of things. Um, and your prefrontal cortex is responsible for the choices that you make. And so under stress, which I loved you calling that a clunky language because it applies to everything. You literally become less able, and once addiction develops, unable to make the choice that you would otherwise make were your
Mhm.
brain in a different state. And so, you psychologically, we have to address. I say it's like having four flat tires and you fix one of them and wonder why the ride still isn't smooth. You
Mm.
have to fix all four
Have to
tires.
fix all 4 of your tires. Come
Yeah,
on, invest in yourself.
yeah,
Amen. I love that. And so that sixth part of the conversation, just to put a button on it, is social cultural impacts, that you do not operate in a vacuum. None of us do. And so, most people who are struggling in this category, they often want to, I can do it. I can control it. I don't need anybody else to help me get my stuff together. But guess what? You're not going through your experiences as a man or a woman or a transgender or intersex person. You're not going through your life without challenges and stressors. They are going to arise,
mhm,
especially right now. Okay, especially right now.
especially,
So having practiced, having people who have gone through a lot of training to know how to be there for you, how to listen to you, is well worth your investment
yeah,
in money that it might cost for copays, or the energy that it takes to get on that telehealth call or drive across town to that therapy appointment, and to seek out a provider that you feel like can support you in your recovery. So, Dr. Nzinga, tell us just a little bit about Eleanor Health and where people can find you and learn more.
thank you. Eleanor Health, I co-founded this company May 2019, so we will be 6 in a couple of months. We serve people who are struggling with a substance, all substances. We have psychiatrists, we have therapists, we have peers who have walked their own addiction and recovery journey, are walking their recovery journey. We have nurses for your physical health. It's really a whole person approach grounded in compassion and
And what
autonomy.
states do you
We are
operate in?
7 states: North Carolina, New Jersey, Washington, Massachusetts, Louisiana, Ohio, Florida, Texas, with 7 more to come, at least by the end of the year. So, yeah, I mean,
Bar.
we're doing close to, 10,000 services a month, which is incredible. So, like, go to eleanorhealth.com. We have tons of education. If you're in one of our states and you think you might need help, we would love for you to reach out. And also
Awesome.
buy my book. You will see yourself in this book, whether you think you're dealing with addiction or not. It's for everybody.
It's for everybody. It's not just for the person who has the addiction. It's not just for the person who is trying to help them with addiction. Because guess what? Those are one and the same.
One and the
You
same.
trying to help somebody else while you over here digging in that. Put that bag of chips down and listen. I'm sorry, I'm talking to myself, y'all. That's for me when I watch it later on. Okay, put it down, Alana. You know better. You know you don't need this right now. You stop it. You stop your shenanigans. All right. So just so that you all can know where to find me, I am Dr. Alauna, trauma psychiatrist. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn at Dr. Alauna, Dralauna. Make sure you put that U in there. Okay. And my organization is Dr. Alauna Trauma Recovery Institute. If you want to support this show and make a donation, you can do that at detry.org. That's scrolling across the bottom of your screen. And I also invite you to come learn more with me in the next Trauma Cure. The Trauma Cure is my 2-day live virtual event where we break down for you so many of these important concepts that you need to know about how psychological trauma predictably programs your brain. And if you are a provider, if you're a doctor, a medical health practitioner, mental health practitioner, counselor, executive coach, pastor, teacher, you are dealing with traumatized people. But the first place that it starts is coming to learn this information so that you can be a better vessel of health for them. So check out thetraumacure.com. Tickets are on sale now. And we will be back with another episode of Demystifying Mental Health every month on the fourth Thursday at noon Central Standard Time. So thanks once again for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful day. And remember, right here, it's time to evolve. Have a good one.